We do expect quite a few people to join us today, so I just want to say welcome. I'm going to give us a few minutes to let folks join in and get settled in, but I do appreciate you coming out today, and we'll be ready to get started in just a couple minutes. Okay. Hello, folks. How's everyone doing? I realized you guys were sitting in a waiting room. I thought I was talking to you there for a second, so you'll have to excuse me. Let's see here. We still have quite a few people joining us, and I'm going to let people in. I'm going to give us just another minute as we have more and more folks entering our waiting room. We did have a large number of people joining us today who registered. So we want to give as many people an opportunity to come on in. I'll keep on admitting here. And honestly, I'm really excited to see such a big group of professionals, knowing that you guys had to work today. So I appreciate you taking extra time to hang out with us. Let's see. Okay. Let's see, we've got a chat. Okay, no problem. Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to continue to admit folks, but we do have a lot of content to cover in a relatively short amount of time when we're talking about it. I'm getting tons of notifications here, so please excuse me for multitasking here in the beginning. I am going to go ahead and get started. It's already a few minutes after 2:30, and then we'll just let people in as they come. We will be recording today's presentation, so if you want to refer back to some of the content, or if you want to share with a professional you work with who wasn't able to make it today, we do provide our PDFs and these recordings on our website, and I'll get a little bit more into that. You can see here on the cover page that our website is dscba.org. My email is elizabeth@dscba.org. My name is Elizabeth Lewis. I am the Director of Education here at Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area. We really want to thank you again for coming out today. We know that Wednesdays are the middle of a busy school week, and even though a lot of you have shorter days, I'm sure you really covet that time. So I can't tell you how much we appreciate that you want to take that extra time to be with us today, learn a little bit more about how to support your student with Down syndrome in the classroom. And I have to be honest with you, this is a workshop that's really near and dear to my heart. I used to support a student with Down syndrome in the classroom, and I understand firsthand the many struggles and rewards that come with supporting a student with a significant disability in a classroom, especially if you're supporting a student in a general education placement setting. There are lots of questions, a lot of concerns and challenges and barriers, but today we're hoping to tackle some of those. I want to be able to cover this content as well as give you all an opportunity to ask questions for us to open up the discussion. And I just want to let you know that we are a safe space. We created our Down Syndrome Education Alliance to provide these free services and supports to professionals, educators, specialists, recognizing that you all need support in order to support our members and our students, and understanding, that this is a tough job. And if there's anything we can do to help fill in those gaps, to help better support you, empower you, inspire you to want to be the best you can for your student, that's why we're here. So please, throughout this presentation, you're going to hear a lot of me saying, feel free to email me, but really do. We are here for you. We're here for free consults, emails, Zooms. We love troubleshooting and brainstorming education related questions, and we are here to support you, and this is a safe space for that. So I want to go ahead and get started with today's presentation, and this is an educational workshop for paraprofessionals. So and again, I'm assuming most, if not all of you, are working with a student who has Down syndrome. That is our area of expertise when it comes to learning profile and common characteristics. However, you can apply some of the same strategies to many students, right? So today we're going to discuss understanding your student with Down syndrome. And I think that the best way to understand how you can best support a student is to really understand who that student is, their strengths, their areas of need, their motivators, etc. We're going to discuss how to support communication, behavior, and really talk about the role, which this is hilarious, autocorrect. I'm noticing it looks like a dinner roll. So we're going to change that. I'm going to make a note of that right now. The role with an E of a paraprofessional, and then give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. Understanding your student with Down syndrome. I've worked with kiddos with Down syndrome for almost 20 years. And each student is very, very, very unique, has his or her own unique skill sets, strengths, challenges, things that make them interesting. There's silly quirks and traits and the things that make them super, super unique. We all have kind of our superpowers, right? And but one thing I know is that there are some common characteristics that we see in students with Down syndrome. And so we're going to go ahead and kind of break that down into Down syndrome 101. Let's talk a little bit about the science behind Down syndrome. It is the most commonly occurring chromosomal disorder in the United States. Trisomy 21 is more than sorry, just a second, let me admit. Trisomy 21 is the most common type of Down syndrome. So that's where you probably hear that the most. Trisomy 21, March 21st is World Down Syndrome Day. And that is where basically in every single cell, we all have 46 chromosomes. We have 2 sets of chromosomes and in 22 pairs plus the X and Y that determines your sex at birth. In individuals with Down syndrome who have trisomy 21, by far the most common type of Down syndrome, over 95%. It's where you have 3 copies of the 21st chromosome instead of 2. So it's just that one extra chromosome that makes an individual with Down syndrome have Down syndrome, and in this case, trisomy 21. So if you are supporting a student, you probably, if you haven't gone through World Down Syndrome Day yet with your students, supported them through that, then you can look forward to that in March. It's a really cool event. Down syndrome is both a cognitive and physical disability. And I think that's really important to make sure that everyone is fully aware of that. It's not just a cognitive processing piece. It's a physical disability. It impacts the student from head to toe, inside and out. And we're going to talk a lot more about that because that obviously impacts the way a student can navigate his or her own environment all throughout the school day. Students with Down syndrome also may have numerous health concerns, such as hypotonia, heart defects, sleep apnea, hearing and vision issues, gastrointestinal issues, leukemia, precocious puberty, delays in potty training, and more. So there are a number of health concerns also that students with Down syndrome can face. So I think it's always it's always a good idea to be mindful of those concerns and know your student and your student's health so that we can rule out, if we're seeing certain behaviors or certain consistencies and routine throughout the day, we can be aware of that student's health and what may be causing those things. We want to always start there first. And then also something to be super mindful about is that recent studies show that 1 in every 7 to 10 individuals with Down syndrome may also have a dual diagnosis of ASD, that's autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, anxiety, OCD, or sensory processing challenges. So that's another thing to be super mindful about when you're working with your student. A lot of students with Down syndrome don't have a dual diagnosis because when you're born with Down syndrome, that's kind of the assumed diagnosis and you don't really look much further from there. But as more and more kids have been tested for different diagnoses, we're finding that that individuals with Down syndrome are also going to developmental pediatricians and learning that there might be other areas of concern and need. So we're getting more and more information that tells us that more and more kids with Down syndrome actually do have the dual diagnosis. Oops. Let me admit someone. Hello. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about common characteristics of students with Down syndrome. Now, remember, there is a wide spectrum of ability. We're all very, very unique. We all have our own strengths and our own challenges, and that's no different with individuals with Down syndrome. But again, there are some common profiles, some common traits that we see in the students we support who have Down syndrome. And we just wanted to touch on those because those might be some characteristics that you can relate to that you've seen in your student and now can maybe understand, okay, this is pretty common. So social beings, they enjoy being in the spotlight, definitely desire a sense of belonging. They want to be part of the group. They want to be a respected and valued member of their community and their group and their classroom. Now, I do want to note, though, if you are working with a student who has a dual diagnosis of something like autism, then you may not have as much of a strength in that area. The social piece may be a bit more difficult and challenging. And so that's something to understand. If you're not seeing your student engage with peers or show a desire to engage with peers, is not making any kind of connections at all and prefers to play alone, these are things to note, be mindful about, maybe make aware to the teacher so she can talk with the parents about it and just make sure everyone's aware. A high desire to be independent. I bet none of you work with a student who is strong-willed, right? Yeah, most of the students I've worked with Down syndrome have stronger willpower than any other student I've ever worked with. And it's something to be mindful of. It can be a very, very big strength, and it can also be a frustrating challenge for the person trying to work with and then cooperate with that student. So we're going to talk about strategies a little bit later on that help support that strength, that desire to be independent, with also maybe being able to eliminate some power struggles. Um, Individuals with Down syndrome are very strong visual learners. You're going to see this over and over again. It's a major strength. So being able to present that student with a ton of content that's highly visually pleasing, big colors, hands-on, pictures and labels. These are all playing to major strength of a learner with Down syndrome. So constantly think visuals, 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 and multimodal visuals in all kinds of different differentiated ways of presenting the content. They enjoy schedules and routines. So this is a great opportunity to help foster independence. So being able to provide those visual aids or a schedule of expectations, and then getting into a routine they can take charge of and feel that independence that they so highly desire, utilizing those routines and schedules can really help foster independence and play to a strength. It's very important to note that there are expressive communication challenges in many students with Down syndrome. They may use other forms of communication. They might use gestures or sign language, maybe just verbal approximations. Some students may be using low, light, or high-tech AAC. There's a very wide, expressive, receptive communication gap. So most often, a student understands far more than he's able to express verbally, and that's something to really keep in mind. I know that sometimes educators or aides or even students and peers may speak about a student who has communication difficulties, kind of in a way as if he's not there. And it's really important not to have conversations about a student within earshot, because that student understands what's going on. And I promise doesn't want to feel ostracized or left out, or made to feel like he doesn't understand that he's right there while you're talking about him. Strong working memory for high interest items or topics. So I bet one or two of you work with a student who's just crazy about a certain theme, topic, character, movie, song, you name it. And that can be a really, really big strength. And we can utilize that when we're trying to achieve other goals, maybe other academic goals, kind of falling back on those things that they're super, super interested in and seeing how we can incorporate them into learning. Because if it is something that's highly motivating, our students can be impressively knowledgeable, can hold just a catalog of information and knowledge about that subject. And so this can be a really big strength that we can work with when we're trying to engage the student in other activities that may be less preferred. Students with Down syndrome benefit greatly, and this is evidence-based, they benefit greatly from consistency and repetition. We've said 20th time's a charm, and that's no joke. Repetition is super important to help build the working memory of a student with Down syndrome. And so being consistent in routine, having those clear expectations, and then repeating the certain activities, things, exercises over and over and over again until you want to turn blue, that's going to be the way you can really start to stimulate the learning and help support that working memory. Students with Down syndrome have a cognitive disability. They do require extra processing time. So that's really important to be mindful about. as you're working with a student, and it may take them a little bit longer to come up with an answer. It may get a little frustrating because it takes even more time than you would expect. And we're going to get a bit more into that, but just noting that the student does require extra processing time. So it's important to be mindful about that when you're communicating, giving a directive, etc. And then hypotonia, and that was included on my health page, but it's very important because every individual born with Down syndrome has hypotonia. And what hypotonia means, and we'll go to the next slide, is that the resting muscles are longer. So our resting muscles are kind of shorter and taut to the bone, and they're firm. Well, an individual with Down syndrome is born with looser, stretchier muscles because they're longer. So because of that, the student may require certain supports. That hypotonia affects you from head to toe. So everything from sitting up and keeping your core upright to, keeping your head up, using your hands and fingers for fine motor activities, getting up, walking from point A to point B, using the bathroom, and communicating are all impacted by the muscles we use. And every muscle is longer and looser and stretchier. And so that makes navigating the physical activities from day to day, the school day, that much more complicated and that much harder. So a lot of times students that I've worked with who have Down syndrome are probably stronger than a lot of typically developing students because they have to work so much harder to do the same things. And it is going to take them more time, more motor planning, and then more physical strength and planning to be able to get the same things done that their peers are doing. So yes, it impacts the gross and fine motor development. So something to always keep in mind when you're working on handwriting, or you're working with art, or things that require, OT, things that require that fine motor skill. These are all things that take a lot of work and a lot more strength than we can realize sometimes. So if we're mindful about that, then we know, maybe when to not push for it, or when to lower the demand, take into consideration that we may be, that the student may be just super tired from trying to work those muscles all day. And then, of course, like we talked about, our tongue's a muscle, our lips are muscles, our jaws, and that's how we communicate. So hypotonia actually impacts oral motor development as well, which leads to the expressive communication challenges. So we're going to get a little bit into that. So communication, I cannot express it enough. All students need to be able to communicate in order to participate. It's like being a detective. We have got to figure out how this student can communicate. If it's not expressive through verbal expression, then what else can we do? And we need to use and accept all forms of communication. So if they're using their words, if they're making verbal approximations, if they're using gestures or movement, pointing, giving thumbs up, thumbs down, if they use pictures, visual aids, if they use AAC, these are things that we need to also use then in the classroom, and we need to accept it. We need to encourage it, model, imitate, whatever they're communicating with. And we need to find ways to continue to build and expand their communication. And so it's very important, if you do support a student in your classroom who is using currently, maybe he's working with an SLP or an AAC specialist, and it's on their IEP, and they're using low tech or light tech or a high tech device, you should be receiving the training you need in order to appropriately communicate with that student, and to help the student build his own communication skills. We're trying to expand that communication, foster more independent communication, give that student the tools he needs to be able to express his thoughts, feelings, ideas, answers to a question, choices, and as independently as possible. And that's how we want to be thinking. So what I say when you're supporting a student with Down syndrome, understanding all of the health and medical issues and concerns that they're facing that contribute to the physical disability that impacts them from head to toe, but also impacts not only their cognitive functioning but everything to communication and fine motor. So understanding that and coming from a place of empathy for that, and then realizing that, okay, we understand all of these challenges and why they have these hurdles, and we know that they understand and want to say a lot more than they can. They just have limitations in their ability to express it right now. And these are always emerging, and we're always working toward, bettering our communication. But for some students, they may never have high intelligibility or articulation. So it's our job to help foster whole child, holistic communication for the student. I can't express how important this is. Now, as a paraprofessional, it's not your job to create a communication system for your student, but it is your job to understand how the student best communicates and to make sure you're talking with your teacher to ensure that you're getting the supports you need so that you guys can communicate in the way that best suits that student. And then finally, it's important to remember that behavior is communication, right? So we're going to find that when students don't have a means to communicate, when they can't express themselves in some sort of way that makes them feel heard, then they're going to resort to alternative methods, right, of communicating. So communication strategies. Here are just some strategies we've collected over the years that we feel benefit the learning profile of a student with Down syndrome. Make sure you use explicit, simple language. I can't say that enough. When we generalize our language and we're just saying like, hey buddies, get on up and we're going to head over to the lunchroom, and you may not get the action from the student. It's really important to address the student, say it by his name, Will, make sure he turns and makes eye contact with you. All right, it's time to go to lunch. Please stand up, push in your chair. Wow, look at you all by yourself. All right, now use walking feet to line up behind Molly. Big high fives at the end. But using those explicit, simple instructions, we're telling them exactly what we want to see, instead of being a little more general and vague about it. And with that processing delay and the receptive language expressive gaps, it's a little harder for a student with Down syndrome to process exactly what you're saying and then figure out how to take action. Now, again, we have students of wide ranges of abilities, and your students well. So you may have a student that totally responds easily, but if you don't, take a look at how you are giving those directives. Make sure you're using those chunks of explicit and simple language. Make sure you're making good eye contact. Wait up to 15 seconds after asking a question or giving a directive to allow for extra processing time. There's that cognitive processing delay. And if we're not being patient and we're not waiting and counting silently in our heads for 10 to 15 seconds, then we may not be giving that student an opportunity to actually express what he or she really wants, to be able to give you a meaningful answer. So try that out. I've had a lot of teachers and a lot of parents throughout the years tell me that single tip, just waiting the 10 to 15 seconds, was a deal breaker in the communication and the behavior strategies that they were using with their student. It changed everything. And it's because that student had time to be able to feel heard and to be able to give a meaningful answer. And again, these students want to have a sense of belonging. They want to feel like a valued, respected, heard member of the classroom, just like every student there. So if we just practice a little patience and wait, then it makes a huge difference in the connections, the meaningful connections you can make with your student. Um, Utilizing visual aids, again, I will not stop. I won't shut up about it. I'm telling you. If you're not using visual aids, then please talk with your teacher about how you can, how about creating some visual aids to help the student to foster independence, help the student plan next steps, to conquer behavioral issues, communication challenges, transitions, et cetera, et cetera. But use those visual aids to help that reinforce what that student needs to know. See, I've got to admit someone else. All right. You can work with your teacher to find opportunities for the student to participate in your group meetings, their student group meetings, circle time, etc. And what I mean by that is, now that we understand your student has a receptive expressive language gap, needs additional processing time, wants to fit in. When we're a part of a group discussion, and maybe it's a group discussion at a grade level that's what your student's not even working on, but you want to be able to help your student meaningfully participate in class, work with your teacher to identify an opportunity, maybe kind of pre-plant an opportunity for your student to be able to communicate his thoughts or share what he did over the weekend, even if he can't communicate through verbal expression, but maybe make a little social story. Use technology like a one-step or a step-by-step button that actually records something that the student wants to share. You can go ahead and decide with the teacher, okay, for calendar time, we're going to call on Josh to let us know that it's Wednesday, the 13th. And because he has a hard time saying that, we're going to practice it. We're going to pre-teach it. And then we're also going to give him a visual aid of a Wednesday and the 13th so that he can hold up, participate with the class, feel like a valued member of the classroom. And we're not allowing the barriers to his expressive verbal communication to keep him from participating with the group. So just work on ways you can find creative ways you can help your student still feel a part of the class, even if he's not expressively communicating. Provide choices. This is a big one. And this goes into behavior as well. But a lot of times when you ask a student who has Down syndrome, who has a difficult time eliciting, getting that meaningful response right away because of the processing, maybe the language isn't quite there, and they don't have the visual for it, provide choices. Do you want to use the red pen or the blue pen? And give them an opportunity to point to what they want. This lets us know how maybe his favorite color is blue, or do you want to play basketball, or would you like to work on a puzzle? And provide him with those visual choices, help him communicate a more meaningful response instead of just a no, instead of just a yes or no answer. Because a lot of our students, when asked, do you want to call, may just resort to automatically, the knee-jerk reaction may be no, even though that's not actually their meaningful answer. But they're having a tough time saying, I actually would like to go play a puzzle instead. So think about those choices. And then, should probably be at the very top of my list. Be patient and empathetic. It must be very, very frustrating to have something to say and not have an easy way to say it. And I think that if we can always try to center ourselves, take a deep breath, and realize how far empathy and patience can take us, realizing that we're working with a student who has to struggle with both a cognitive and physical disability every single day that impacts him from head to toe, inside and out. And all he wants to do is be a part of this class and be a part of this school and a part of his community. If we start from that perspective, we find that we have a lot more patience to be flexible and creative, and to start really thinking more meaningfully about how we can support the student. I wanted to let some of you guys know before we get into behavior, because that's a big one. We've had a lot of folks joining us a little bit later in this presentation, which is totally fine. We really we respect your time and understand that you've had a busy day at work already. We really appreciate you joining us later in the afternoon for the presentation, and we will have it available as a recording and as PDF copies of the presentation will be available on our website. I'll give you our website details at the end of the presentation so you can make note, but those will be up probably sometime next week. So I just wanted to let you know in case you were nervous that you forgot or that you missed some of the presentation. You can always circle back to it, what you missed. Okay, so behavior. I bet none of you have ever had a student who has eloped or hid under something, right? Behavior is something that we see, well, in all kids, right? In all students and in all grown-ups, to be quite honest. But what we are talking about is behavior in students with Down syndrome. And it's not uncommon to see some challenging behaviors. And now that we've talked about all of the challenges that these students face every single day, one can understand why you might get a little tired, grumpy, frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, and feel like you gotta lash out with some behaviors. But it doesn't have to look like that. It doesn't have to look like a big challenge all the time. And we're going to talk about how we can understand the behaviors first and then strategize about how to deal with some of our more challenging behaviors. Again, behavior is communication. So if a student does not have access to appropriately communicate his thoughts, ideas, feelings, wants, and needs, he will find a way to communicate them in a different way. We all do. I know of plenty of grown-ups who do not use their words, and I bet you do too. And so we want to make sure that we are looking at it from that perspective. You know, why am I seeing this behavior? Well, is it because he can't communicate, right? We'll see. It serves a function. Behavior always serves a function, whether it's a sensory need. Maybe the student's dysregulated and needs to do some jumping jacks or bounce on a trampoline, or needs to stick his hands in some therapy, or needs some compression squeezes or a weighted vest. Sometimes when a student is dysregulated and is not experiencing that balanced equilibrium, we will see behaviors come out. Sometimes they're just in an attempt to self-regulate. Sometimes it's just a low impulse control in a moment because we don't have the communication tools we need to say, I'm feeling a little bit anxious right now and everything's overwhelming in this classroom, and I just got out of recess and I'm wound up. And so because it's hard to articulate that, we may see some behaviors around sensory needs. Another thing is behavior serves as a function to escape non-preferred actions, non-preferred items on the agenda. Also attention. I said in the beginning, a big strength of our students is that they love the spotlight. They love to shine, and attention, whether it's negative or positive, is rewarding. And so if a student is running away at the same time every day to hide under a desk and all the students laugh, well, that's reinforcing a challenging behavior, but it's rewarding that student. If the student is hearing, no walking, Jonathan, no, or no running, Jonathan, no running, Jonathan, they're hearing running and Jonathan, and you're getting the response, a reactionary response, right? And so you're going to keep on running, right? And so attention is definitely one that we see as function that we are serving for some of our kiddos. And then there's the tangible. So it's access to something you do want, right? I'm going to throw a fit, and hey, these behaviors serve as a function for everybody. We all do this. But yes, so access to a thing that you do want. You're going to throw a big behavior. I want it and I want it now. And until finally, someone can't stand it anymore and they just give you what you want because they just can't deal with the behavior anymore. I'm going to check this chat real quick just to make sure I'm not missing something. This might be. Okay, so I'm getting some, sorry about that. I'm getting some direct messages and I will respond to these. We are going to have a Q&A session toward the end of this. And if there are any specific questions you have about a student, obviously we want to respect privacy, students' privacy and your own, should you want that as well. And we're here to help strategize with some very specific questions you may have about your student. And we can always schedule a time to consult, whether that's via Zoom or over the phone or email. And I'm happy to work with you on some really specific areas of need for a specific student. And yes. Yes. So, and I know I'm saying him, and I hope, let me clarify. Sometimes I just use a certain pronoun, and it may be a him or her, but students, both female and male students with Down syndrome, do engage, will engage in all of the behaviors that we're talking about. Identifying the function. So if we're identifying the function, we can then replace the behavior with something more appropriate that serves the same function. So if we know they want attention, well, they can ask us for that in a different way. They can achieve the attention in a different way using walking feet. Now, how about, Jonathan, I see you're using walking feet. High five. They're getting attention, they're getting the reward, but we've replaced the behavior with something more appropriate because we're using that explicit language and setting that expectation. Okay, so when we're talking about function, we're talking about our ABCs, identifying the antecedent, the thing that's happening right before the behavior occurs, the behavior itself, what is the behavior, and then the consequence, what's happening right after the behavior occurs. We're going to dive a little bit into this because even though it's obviously a behaviorist's responsibility for creating a behavior intervention plan or creating, a certain type of plan that you'll be using at school with that student, that is their responsibility and responsible for training you so that you can implement it with full fidelity when you are working with the student. But I think it is important as a paraprofessional to work toward understanding these things because quite frankly, these behaviorists go in and they've got, a 1 hour observation or 3 20-minute observations over the course of a month where you're spending day in and day out with the student and you see it all. And the more you understand about identifying functions, the more you can help support the team by providing meaningful feedback. And so let's take an example here. So here's an example, Mr. Will. So Will has a difficult time transitioning from recess into math class. He climbs to the top of a play structure and refuses to get down. This is a true story, by the way. When he finally gets down, he storms into class, walks to his desk and sits down. Then his aide presents him with a worksheet the rest of the class is working on, which is focusing on division. Now, keep in mind, Will's IEP goal focuses on addition and subtraction up to 20. So this is a classroom. He's in a general ed classroom setting, and the rest of the class is working on division. He gets a worksheet with a bunch of division problems on it, even though it's definitely far above his IEP goal of adding and subtracting up to 20. So Will clears his desk. He falls to the floor and refuses to stand up or clean up. After several minutes of trying, his teacher asks the aide to escort him to the principal's office for a talk. So I want you to think about the ABC. So what was happening right before the behavior started? What was the behavior? What did he do? And what was the consequence? What happened right after the behavior? Well, in this case, Will is transitioning from recess to math. So recess, which I happen to know because I know Will, is a very, very preferred activity. He loves gross motor play, climbing, kicking the balls around, and that's a very preferred activity. Then he's transitioning into math class, which is a lot more abstract and scary. So he's gonna, do the escape routine until finally he's worn out and needs to come back down. He gets into the class, maybe deciding to join and ready to sit down. And then he's presented with a demanding worksheet that is probably, not an appropriate demand for him, considering that it's a mismatch with his current goals. So now he sat down and he's looking at something that is very difficult to understand, looks pretty abstract. So he clears his desk. I'm sure the students around him are probably reacting, gasping. Some might be laughing. Some might be saying his name out loud. And he falls to the floor until basically he's nearly dragged to the principal's office for a talk. Well, he gets into the principal's office and the principal is chatting away with him. He's got a comfy chair and, well, he's not doing a bit of math. So we can take a look at this example and we can see that transitioning from a highly preferred activity to a non-preferred activity with inappropriate demand has caused this behavior, this function. That was the antecedent. The antecedent. And so that's what happened right prior to the behavior. He gives a very big behavior, so big, in fact, that he has to go to the principal's office. Maybe if he just pouted or went to the corner of the room, he wouldn't get to actually escape the classroom. So a big behavior, principal's office, and then the consequence is that he gets out of doing his math work and he gets to hang out with the principal for some one-on-one attention. So escape and avoidance could be the function. There might be a little bit of attention seeking in there as well, but we can see now, okay, we're seeing these mismatches. And when you understand that, then maybe you can start thinking of ways of how we can replace this behavior that he's engaging in to something else that serves the same function. For example, using a card that asks for a break. Maybe only setting a timer for 2 or 3 minutes for him to work on something, setting him up for small successes. Showing a sign that says this is hard, taking a look and making sure in advance that the work you're about to present to him is appropriate and that it's something he can do. That's a great way to try to avoid that fear of failure and that higher demand. So you get to start being creative about how can we set this up and set him up for success so that if he doesn't want to do the math problem or he thinks it's hard, he has a better way of telling you. Then perhaps you can even, reward that with a quick break, or like I said, just a time segments that set him up for success. So we have a ton of behavioral strategies, so many, I can't even see my top one. Let's see. It says provide explicit expectations in 1 to 2 step digestible chunks, right? So again, we want to provide clear expectations, not no running. We want to say use walking feet, hands to yourself. Utilize visual aids to help support positive behaviors. Short schedules, rewards chart, first then charts are really good for our younger learners. There are charts you can use on your phone, where I use a great one called Stellar, STELLAR, where you can customize the number of stars they earn, a specific activity, what they're going to get when they complete it. And they can actually touch the star on the device and put it up to a blank star, and when it hits it, they feel it burst underneath their fingers. So it gives them a little tactile pleasure there as well, and just kind of motivates them further. So you can utilize, again, either physical or digital visual aids to help with those things. I love using the countdown app for a visual timer on my phone based on my student. If I have a student, for example, he's so into ATVs. That's all he loves, ATVs, any kind of off-road vehicle. And so I can get online on Google using the app. It's called Countdown Visual Timer app. It's got a rubber ducky on the front of it. They have a ton of pictures you can use, or you can search from images and actually bring in customized images. So for this student, huge motivator is the ATVs. So we can customize it, put a picture of an ATV in there. The visual timer covers it up fully. And then as the clock's ticking down, you can watch the ATV slowly appear. You can customize how long it takes, but that's a great way to keep a student engaged in an activity for a set number of minutes, meeting that expectation, and then getting a little reward built in with the timer. So that's kind of an example of utilizing strengths motivators and high interest items. Like for example, I do flashcards with a student using pictures from, their favorite characters, and they can read the sight words, and then I've got like a picture they can see on the back if they get the sight word correct. And they're super excited about that, waving hi to a favorite character, or it could be some other kind of surprise that they like. But that's kind of building in little rewards into your demands. I have an example here that says spider in the book. And this is a great way to keep kids on task with your academic demands while still giving them some little rewards like throughout the time you're engaging, so that you don't have to feel like it's just like, okay, let's work for 10 minutes and then you get 3 minutes to watch an iPad. Try to think of ways that you can engage and motivate your student and actually still be still incorporate the activity you're doing or the goal you're working on, and embedding those little rewards. So the spider in the book is just one example of me working with a student who's building reading and comprehension and who has an expected number of sight words to use. So he really loves the little critter books. And in those little critter books, there's a tiny little spider hiding on each page. Well, the first time he discovered that one was hiding, he loved that guy and he kind of pretended to make him crawl around. So I went with his cue. It was something he was motivated and interested in. And so I said, oh, he's on every page. And I made him jump off the page, pretended that he jumped off the page and into my student's hair or into my hair. And then he swung around for a minute and then jumped back into the book. Well, my student was so excited. He wanted to do it again and again and again and again. So then I set the expectation after every 5 pages or 6 pages, then we'll find the spider and he'll jump out, jump into my hair, swing around and jump back into the book. Well, that got us through a 32-page book without having to take big breaks or having to say work now and then play. We embedded little creative rewards into the activity. And that's a way to keep your student engaged and motivated, and to kind of diffuse those big power struggles with them associating the activity you're doing with work or demand. Paying attention to sensory needs. It's really important that you understand when your student's dysregulated. A lot of our students with Down syndrome stem. They may have verbal stems that kind of sound like gritting teeth or making noises like that. You might hear, you may see a repetitive behavior. These are self-regulation techniques. A lot of students don't even realize they're doing it, but it's the body's way of trying to maintain balance, trying to regulate itself. So it's something that shouldn't have a lot of negative attention brought to it. If it is super disruptive or distracting, then we may want to help support that student's awareness or help them maybe find a replacement stem or something that they can do. Maybe again, holding like the therapy during circle time or something, instead of doing lots of rocking back and forth, or give them a rocking chair and maybe have a preferred seating. But just please note that some of those behaviors, like the stimming behaviors, are a way to self-regulate, and we shouldn't put them into like a negative context. Creative distraction. Yes, creative distraction goes a very long way. Offering a helper job. So we talked about Will earlier, who loves recess, doesn't like math, and has a tough time coming down from the play structure in order to get into math. Well, the thing that we did to get him to transition into the classroom, instead of having the aide wait next to the play structure for 25 minutes, was we offered him the choice of ringing the bell, handing out tissues or napkins, or squirting the hand sanitizer. So now he feels like a valued, respected member of the classroom. He's a big helper. The teacher loves him. We've also given him heavy work, where he's collecting balls in the big buckets and pushing them around. We're telling him he's so strong. And now he feels rewarded because he is being a productive member of the classroom. So always think about ways that your student can be a big helper. These are great ways to help them feel included and give them meaningful ways to participate. And we can sometimes avoid or reduce those big behaviors when we're redirecting with different activities that are more appropriate. Be flexible when you can. I use a try again strategy, which is if you are working with a student who is engaging and maybe semi, I don't want to say unsafe, because we always want to acknowledge unsafe behaviors, but let's say it's with you and maybe they're pushing you a little too hard to get your attention, right? So instead of saying, no, no, Sophie, don't push. Instead, maybe turning and saying, I see you want my attention. Try again using your words or a sign, right? So giving them an opportunity to try it again, to feel what that feels like, and then to experience success when they see that you've got a big smile on your face because they were appropriate in the way they used to get your attention. That's another method to help reduce those big power struggles. Ignore safe, attention-seeking behaviors. Start small. Like I said, if you're working on a very non-preferred academic activity, maybe just set that timer for 2 or 3 minutes at first, then do a little dance, get right back to it. Then do another little dance or warm up, start small with successes. Let that student feel his successes or her successes. If we want to reduce the time we're doing or reduce the number of problems so that they can feel successful, we're building their confidence and that self-efficacy to continue moving forward. And then just work with the team to make sure you have a clear understanding about how to implement the current behavioral intervention plan or the FBA that is in place. Again, it's not your job to create it, but it is your job to be informed and receive the training you need so that you can implement this with the student. You're the one paying them with the most, right? Okay. Here are just some examples of some positive support, behavioral supports, visual timers. You can use tons of different apps on your phone that support behaviors, whether you're wanting charts, first then, visual timers, etc. One thing that I have always loved is being hands-free. So I have a picture here of like a server's apron with pockets, because I'm constantly looking for opportunities to embed learning wherever we are in whatever environment. And as an aide, even if we were out on the playground, knowing that my student needed some gross motor support, so I needed to be close by, I would have things like different manipulatives or a sand timer or flashcards or things that we might incorporate organically into the activities we're doing there. Also, if you have students who elope, who are trying to escape or avoid an activity, you want to be hands-free. So I've always encouraged just bringing in like a little apron. You can keep your cell phone in there. You can keep a pen and little pad if you need to think on the spot, and any visuals that you're using, etc. And then you can still be hands-free to support your student in any ways you need to keep them safe or to help with self-help skills, etc. Learned helplessness. This is important. We need to make sure that we're not helping too much. The role of a peer professional is not to do everything for that student, right? We want to make sure that we're holding our students to high expectations, that we're modeling the same for the peers, for the students' peers. We want to make sure they understand that the student should not be treated like a baby, that he needs to learn, or she needs to learn to do the same things everyone else is learning to do. And then help them understand it may take a little extra time, but with encouragement and high fives and helping out when it really matters, that's a way they can be a good friend and help their friends succeed. Use visual tools to help support the independence. Remember to say things like "you try first" or "you can do it." Utilize motivators like visual timers to challenge the student to complete the task independently. Use that timer that's motivating and say, how fast can you put up your backpack and hang up your coat and get to circle time? If that's something that you have a tough time, they want you to hold everything, put it there. So just try to think out of the box of ways you can promote independence, because learned helplessness is a very real thing, especially with independence with Down syndrome. They can and will take advantage of your help if we're not showing them that they can do it all by themselves. So I just want to touch on the role of a paraprofessional here. And let's see, we've got another chat question before we go into here. 3:30, join you in 10, no problem. And again, I'm going to wrap up here in just the next 5 minutes or so. And then we'll be able to open up any questions you may have, and you can send them to me via chat. So the role of a paraprofessional. First, it's important to know your student. It's important to take that part seriously. Understand your student's health concerns. Now that you know, individuals with Down syndrome do have numerous health concerns to be considered. It's important to understand those. And again, coming from a place of empathy, if you know your student has sleep apnea or that he has respiratory issues and challenges because he had a heart defect and had to have open heart surgery when he was 3 months old, you may understand why he seems a little bit more tired than the other students at noon, and why you might see more behaviors come out, why you might want to front load academics in the beginning of the day and work on more social play toward the end, or adjust your instruction. By understanding your student, you're able to make these adjustments to help support his or her success. Know their strengths, their interests, their motivators, their areas of need. I always say, please focus on the cans and not the can'ts. We always want to utilize a strengths-based approach. Know your student's strengths. Know the things that make him or her tick, their motivators and interests, and then also be aware of those areas of need, the things that are challenging, so that when we're focusing on our cans, we can help fill in those gaps. We can say, well, okay, so he can't really write full sentences right now, but he can see, identify words in a word bank and put them together in order to make a sentence, right? Understand communication strengths and challenges. I think I've hammered that one in. Communication is key. Understanding self-help needs. As a paraprofessional, you may be responsible for supporting certain self-help or routines or tasks. That may include toileting. It may include feeding. There are a wide variety of needs and self-help skills. And so just being aware and understanding what your role is specifically, and asking for the training or the instructions or guidance you need in order to support the student appropriately, make everyone feel safe, and make sure that you're utilizing best practices. Familiarize yourself with IEP goals at a glance, accommodations and modifications that have been established for the student, and think about how to incorporate learning into every environment. We're just kind of constantly thinking about that. Oh, they're counting up to 10. So even when we're outside and jumping on rocks, we can count the rocks that we're jumping on, so just kind of being mindful of those things really helps. Be a bridge. So paraprofessionals are responsible for bridging the gaps between the facts about the student and the facts about the school environment, while fostering independence in the following areas: communication with the proper training, right, as needed, accessing and attending lesson content. So you're there to bridge the gap between a teacher who's maybe giving whole group instruction and your student who may be working at a lower grade level and needs content presented maybe in a different way, maybe in an audio book with headphones on, or maybe in a graphic organizer where you're, as the teacher's discussing main key topics, you're pointing to the key words and showing a picture of them. So it's helping bridge that gap in the teacher's instruction and whole group lessons, and helping your student access what's being taught with the modifications that have been created for them if they need modifications. And so just making sure that you're bridging that and helping your student access the content. Behavior as needed, right? With the training and the guidance, just making sure that you're helping implement that plan throughout the day. Helping with social connections, being a bridge to social connections, making sure that you the opportunities when you see your student watching two other kiddos interact or play on the soccer field, seeing if you can't help bridge a connection there and create opportunities for sharing, problem solving, taking turns, really building those pragmatic communication skills and social skills that your student will need as he continues forward in school and throughout the community. And then again, with self-help, being that bridge. If your student does need support in certain self-help areas like toileting, feeding, certain routines, that you're bridging that while all, again, fostering independence. So doing and utilizing all those tools we've been talking about so that you can be that bridge and you can foster, the support, but you're also encouraging independence. Paraprofessionals are not responsible for being the teacher. The gen ed teacher or the special ed teacher are still responsible for your students' education. So just remember that. They are still responsible for that student's holistic communication. If you are supporting a student in a general ed classroom setting and you're that one-on-one aide, that does not mean you are now that student's teacher. That teacher is still the teacher, and you are there to support and fill in the gaps. You are not responsible for getting your student up to grade level standards. Until your student's ready to transition into high school, your student can be working below grade level and can still continue working below grade level if the parents have decided that they are not on diploma track. And many students with Down syndrome will not be on diploma track and therefore are not held accountable to grade level standards. They have an opportunity to work on modified curriculum to meet their own individual goals that are in their IEPs. You're not responsible for modifying the curriculum or the content. That should be done by a collaborative effort between the general ed teacher, special ed teacher, resource specialist, whoever is on your student's IEP team. They should be identifying who is overseeing modifications to make sure that the demand and the modifications are appropriate for that student's IEP goals while also connecting to the curriculum. You're just there to help bridge that gap by making sure that that content is there in front of the student when the teacher is teaching the content, and you can help make those connections. But the work itself that's being modified should be done by a certified teacher. if teachers are asking you to make modifications, we do have some paras who have been doing this a long time, and they kind of have a rhythm with the parent and the teacher, and they're able to understand kind of a formula for modifications. They run them past the teacher gives the thumbs up, and everyone has a really healthy communication when it comes to making modifications. So I'm not saying that it's, 1000%, outside of your realm, but I just want you to know that's not your responsibility. Technically, it's not. I just want to check. As a parent, thank you to, I will read this to everyone. As a parent, I just want to say thank you to all the paraprofessionals who are here. We so appreciate your dedication to students you are working with. It's not always easy role, and we understand and see all the hard work that you put in. You're absolutely right, Aaron. You guys have big jobs, and that's why we're that's why we're here today, and why we've all come together, because we acknowledge that and have a ton of respect for the work that you do. So finally, here we are. Use us as a resource. We do love you. We do respect what you do, and we do understand you have an important job. So we're here to support you. If you would like to access our resources, all you have to do is log on to dscba.org. You can even register to be a member. It's free. You can register as an educator. So if we ever have any workshops, webinars, really special newsletters for educators to give you little tips and tricks and all of those good things, we'll send those out to you. Again, it's free, it's easy, it's simple. You can just log on, become a member, and then you're always informed about what we've got going on the education side of things. But you do have access to tons of stuff. We have the workshops, webinars. We have a low-tech communications library where you can actually customize visual boards for your students across a variety of topics and content. You can check that out on our website as well. We can even customize content for you if you don't have access to Boardmaker, and we'd be happy to do that. All of those instructions are included on that website under AAC communications. We have a lending library of evidence-based learning approaches that we know work successfully with the learning profile of students with Down syndrome. If you are interested in talking with your teacher about introducing an approach that may be beneficial for your student who's having a difficult time grasping a certain concept like math or reading, or spelling or writing, don't hesitate to reach out to us and see what we have available. These aren't curriculums. These are just approaches that can be incorporated into what you're currently working on in the classroom, that just have certain visuals and dynamics of a program that work with the strengths of a learner with Down syndrome. And then we provide free consult via phone, email, Zoom. You can always contact me, Elizabeth, and there's my email address for all education related questions. So with that, I'm pretty proud of myself because I'm long-winded. So I just wanted to go ahead and open up. I know we covered a whole lot of content, so I just want to go ahead and open up our chat for any questions you guys might have about what we covered today, or if there's anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to discuss. And speaking of that, as soon as we get out of this Zoom workshop, as soon as you either leave the meeting or I end the meeting for all, you're going to be introduced to a really short survey. It's super user friendly. It's a lot of just a few, but not a lot. It's like 7 button pushings with maybe 1 or 2 questions where you could actually fill in content. But if you could just get through that quick survey after our presentation, we'd love to get your feedback. The feedback we get from you drives our services. And so it's truly valuable to us. We take your feedback and then we make changes to improve the services we're providing to you. So we'd really appreciate it if you'd complete the survey following this meeting or this session. And I'm going to go ahead and get to questions now. Well, thank you, Carl. You rock too. And thank you, all paras and parents. Thanks, Carl, for giving the shout out to the paras. They are awesome. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you and how much we feel your involvement and your feedback and your area of expertise is so important to the education team. To help understand what mood they are in, we can all use the zones of regulation. Yes, that's correct. Talking about feelings, again, those visual aids. When you're talking about feelings, I like to combine a visual aid with maybe a social story. The student can, we can take pictures of the student giving, making all the faces frowny, scared, happy, excited, and include him or her in that social story, which is a great way since they love to be the center of attention. Let's see here. Let's see what else we have here. Is it normal to have no behavior issues, no health issues, or even a single allergy? My son is 5. He has none of the above. Just my curiosity. He's very speech delayed, physically delayed. He's in public school and kindergarten. Also, could I have your email ID? Yes, my email is here on this last screen, elizabeth@dscba.org. There you go. And in regard, this is the thing, right? We're all very unique individuals. Currently, your son is 5. And if he is having some speech and physical delays, maybe as he gets older, depending on how big those gaps are, if he doesn't have the right communication tools in place, or he's frustrated with being able to navigate the environment around him, we may see some behaviors come out, we may not. Like with any kiddo, having Down syndrome or not, hey, if your child is not engaging in behaviors, I say, good for you and him, and or well done. And if there aren't any health issues or allergies, then that's just a wonderful blessing. And those are just things to be mindful of. And then if you do ever see any health issues or behaviors down the road, then you can refer back and understand why they may be happening. Let's see here. Any suggestions for resources for a dual language student? Oh, that's a great question. We have and I'm Spanish, English, yeah. That's a great question. And we've really been bulking up the services that we provide to our Spanish speaking communities and helping them understand how to best support their children and advocate for their children as students. And I think that in general, being able to bridge the gap between, so understanding where the family is as far as if English is an accessible language for the family, if not, if there is an interpreter who can help make sure that the home and school communication is healthy, so that we can figure out how to best approach communication, behavior, etc. Now, that being said, I know that the protocol when being taught in an English speaking school is that the communication in the school is generally English. That being said, we do have, for example, in our low-tech library, Spanish versions of these behavior charts, the visual schedules, etc. So you're able to download an English version that the student could use in the school environment, and a Spanish version that the student could use in the home environment, just to help both sides kind of understand what we're working on holistically. And if that doesn't make sense, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can also connect you with Viviana, who handles our Spanish speaking family community. And we have several different resources that we can provide to you. And I'm also even happy to arrange for meeting with the family to better understand where their challenges are, to the school team to understand how we can bridge those gaps in communication. if that makes sense. When a student with Down syndrome regresses from pre-pandemic, what other steps do you recommend we use? Some examples of the situation: becoming nonverbal, more screaming, becoming more destructive. Sure, we've had a lot of, and I just want to say in advance, I appreciate the patience I'm sure all of you have worked hard to have as we've transitioned from this pandemic back into on-site schooling. A lot of our families have expressed concerns for their children and getting back into the school environment after being out of it for so long. And with that, when you have a student who has a cognitive, physical disability and communication delays and challenges, who may also have a dual diagnosis. We may be working with someone who does not adjust to change very easily. We may see big behaviors. And I think it's really important, if you're starting to see things that are highly destructive, disruptive, or impeding that student's development from a behavioral standpoint, that it's important that the education team addresses that immediately, working with a behaviorist. They may end up needing to do a functional behavior analysis if they haven't already, just to make sure we're identifying those functions of behavior and tackling it with a sound plan that everybody can follow. As a paraprofessional, it's certainly not your responsibility for trying to manage big explosive behaviors. That means that's a red flag, that especially if it's consistently happening, that a behavior specialist needs to come on board and needs to come up with a holistic plan to attack these behaviors and address them in the best way possible to keep everybody safe and to keep that regression, from becoming even more regression. Let's see. My student is in kindergarten. Other students have begun to notice his differences. Is there a best way to describe Down syndrome to young students? That's a great question, Russell. As a matter of fact, something you may want to talk with your team or your students' parents with is that we do ability awareness presentations. And I can even provide to you, if you want to send me an email, we customize them. We do believe in advocating for, we believe that students with Down syndrome eventually should be great advocates for themselves, that this isn't something to hide, to be ashamed of, that it's not a bad thing. And the earlier we can start teaching other students about disabilities, about what makes that student maybe a little bit different, what also all the different things that you have in common with that student, and how you can start supporting that student in mindful ways to be a good friend. So we offer virtual and limited on-site, depending on the situation, presentations that address all of those things. And we offer them from kindergarten through 12th grade. And they're free presentations that we can customize, that talk about that student, the student's interests, motivators, strengths. But we also address those things that make them a little different, like the communication challenges, and maybe that, the hypotonia, the loose and stretchy muscles. And it gives kids a great opportunity to understand a little bit more about how to support their peer with a disability, but also just really brings awareness and empathy. It's one of my favorite parts of the job. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, it's Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and I'd love to come to your school virtually and provide a presentation anytime. If you'd like to give a presentation or would like to engage the teacher or parent to do so, I can give you kind of the content to work with, and then you guys could do it at the school yourselves as well. So there's some flexibility with that. But I think if you'd like to get some more details about the content we present, feel free to email me directly, and I'll be happy to send you an example of our ability awareness presentation, and then we can just go from there. Oh, I see, a dual immersion program. Megan, I'm going to kind of stick to, yes, sorry. That's a unique question. And sorry, folks, we're talking about the dual language, so Spanish and English. So it's a dual immersion program at a school. And I know that there can be, depending on, the language that's used mostly at home, or if there is just the need for wanting the student to learn two different languages. When that student has Down syndrome, you're going to have more of a challenge, because we know that that receptive and expressive communication gap is there. We do understand that it's a little bit harder. It takes a little bit longer to develop those language skills. And when you're trying to learn two languages at once, it can cross some wires and become pretty confusing. And so I think that it would be great if we, maybe if you reached out to me directly, so I could gain a little bit better of understanding about what's going on overall. And so we can kind of troubleshoot where the challenges may be, if that makes sense. You're welcome, Megan, no problem. Thank you. And I just, because we don't have any anyone else typing in questions right now, I want to go back to the kindergartner and the students who have begun to notice the differences. I think that as a professional, and you may not have your ability awareness presentation right now. So for any of you who are getting those questions, I always like to, and it's probably important to check with the parent and the teacher. We want to make sure that the parent's comfortable with having an open conversation about Down syndrome. But if that is the case, I always say that awareness, and understanding those are the foundations for us to build our empathy and our compassion, and then to continue to learn and make that meaningful connection. So I think that empathizing with the fact that the students are seeing some differences and saying, yeah, there are some differences, and then maybe pointing out some of the differences they have from one another, not just the student with Down syndrome. You can talk about how Down syndrome is just one part of that student, and that it may make some things a little bit harder to learn or do, but that mostly the student's just like you and like other kids. And then think about ways that they're different. You might have a student who has glasses. You might have a student who has freckles and red hair, and another student who has long, straight black hair. Start to compare differences like that. Who likes chocolate cake? Who likes vanilla cake? And trying to generalize it a bit, but while acknowledging and advocating for that student that is something, that yes, there is a difference there, and these are some of the differences, and this is how you can help be a good friend, because those differences make some things a little bit harder to do. But otherwise, we're all alike, we're all alike in a lot of ways. And so I think just kind of modeling that type of language is a great start, especially for kindergartners. And do we have any other questions here? I think I've addressed everything. If not, again, and if you guys have, two more, here we go. Thank you. Oh, you're very welcome. Do you have any tips on what to do when the student is participating in another student's disruptive behavior, wrestling, bear hugs, and the line? Yeah, so some of my tips are so one thing I will say about students with Down syndrome, they will often imitate what they see. And if there is a student who's engaging in a big behavior, you may see that student with Down syndrome imitate that behavior because it might be getting attention, might be getting him or her attention. I do strongly believe in peer supports, and maybe pairing up with a buddy who's modeling a more appropriate behavior, making sure you're kind of denying access, maybe getting in, lining, like a preferred spot in line, that's not giving direct access to the student who's engaging in disruptive behaviors. And another student's, okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was reading it correctly. Yes, so because we do know that students with Down syndrome can imitate behaviors, we want to try to put them around peer supports who are modeling more appropriate behaviors, and trying to naturalistically, as much as we can, avoid putting them around students who may be engaging in more disruptive or attention-seeking behaviors. And that might just mean different places in line. Maybe the other students in front of the other one, student with Down syndrome is facing this way, and we are, you might have a little token economy for keeping hands to himself and having a safe body in line, getting big praise for meeting that expectation, so that we're redirecting and giving him attention or her attention for those behaviors and around students who are modeling them, versus having to react to now 2 students engaging in what another student started. Okay, how important is the teacher aide in the class? My son has one, but I feel a little concerned that he might depend on the aide too much. Usually he likes to be by himself at home. Any advice? IEP meeting. Any advice or tips? A little nervous about it. Yes, so please email me personally about IEP. That's a whole other topic, and that's a parent concern. So because this workshop was geared toward paraprofessionals specifically, I want to definitely address IEP concerns and dependence. And, you know, I'm not quite sure exactly what the situation is at school. So if your son has a one-on-one para that he's working with, kind of based on the content we covered today, understanding where, you know, what the para's role is, understanding that, you know, working with the team to communicate and make sure that the para has a clear understanding about how to foster independence, that the para has the training and the supports and tools needed to support communication, behavior, social interactions, and then to also, you know, start fading away when we are promoting independence and we're seeing that student be able to do certain things on his own. But it sounds like we should schedule a consult for just the 2 of us, so we can dive a little bit more deeply into your concerns. Okay. Am I missing anyone else? I think that's it. Pretty good timing. Thank you all so much for participating today. I really appreciate you coming out and taking the time with us. Again, we'll have this up next week if you need to refer back to the content. But in the meantime, everyone have a great week. Thanks for joining me, and we hope to see you around for another session or another workshop soon. Everybody take care. And remember, fill out that survey if you can.